All right, so this is Blender. Blender is a free application, actually, that you can download off the web for free, which is why it's a free application. But no, in all seriousness, it's amazing for what it does, and for the fact that it's free. It is an incredible piece of software, and is one that's well worth a lot more time than we're going to be able to spend on it in class. Okay. When you open it, it's going to look a lot like just this, flat gray. They didn't spend a ton of time on making it look pretty or anything like that. It's very utilitarian in a lot of ways. But as we get to use it more and more and more, I think we'll appreciate that, because it becomes, it's pretty logical as far as like where you find stuff. If I need to look for this, it's here. If I need to look for this, it's here. 3D animation is an incredibly complicated and complex thing. We're just going to barely touch the surface, or not even scratch the surface. We're just going to touch the surface and get started with it. But it's very cool, and this is one of those programs that once you get started on it, you honestly can probably start playing with it at home. You find yourself all of a sudden it's 2 in the morning, and you're like, what? Whoa, wow, when did that happen? Because the amount of stuff that you can do with it is just really cool. There's a couple things that we need to do. First things first. Let me just reset this. I'm going to go back to factory settings here. One of the things, because of the way we work in this lab here, is Blender is a 3-dimensional program, but you're displaying 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional screen. Okay, so our screens are flat. So you have to be able to swivel around your objects to see them from all sides. Okay, this is something that you're not used to with Adobe Flash or the 2D animation that we've been using up till now. So you have to be able to do that. Now, if I just left click, nothing really happens. Actually, we'll talk about that little crosshairs in a second. So what I need to be able to do in order to spin around is I need to set it so that I hold down a key on the keyboard, I can spin around. The reason why this is important is we have these Mac mice here that I'm actually not really overly fond of. And they have the little scroll ball in the middle. And the way Blender is set up from the get-go is that you're supposed to press down the scroll wheel and hold that down and then drag, and you should be able to spin. But as I just did there, a lot of times these scroll wheels, while you can press down on them technically speaking, it doesn't work. So we're going to go over here, and we're going to go to User Preferences, and we're going to change this. You'll see this window come up. We're just going to go to Input, and you're going to go right here, and you're going to click Emulate 3-button Mouse. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go to the bottom of this window, and you're going to hit Save as Default. Okay, that's really important. If you don't do that, if you just close out of it or whatever, it's not going to save it for tomorrow. So tomorrow it'll be right back to the way it was. The other thing that I like to do, and you can try this or not, is I like to select Rotate Around Selection, so that once I've clicked on an object, it rotates around that object instead of around the center of the scene. It's just easier for me. Some people, that drives them nuts. So you just play with it, see if you like it. If not, no big deal. So I'm going to go down here and hit Save as Default. Now let's just talk about it. In Blender, you have your major 3D window here. This is your 3D view. And as I'm moving around in this, if I hit the Option key, it allows me to spin around an object. So I just hit the Option key, and I click with the left mouse button, and I just drag around, and you can see how I can move around my object. In 3D space, you're going to see these 3 arrows here, okay? And you'll notice that it corresponds with these little guys here. Your Z-axis is vertical, and your X and Y axes are your horizontal axes. And you'll see how they're the same colors, and they correspond here with the axes that we see on the cube that we've got there. To zoom in and out, like I am right now, you just use the scroll wheel on the mouse. Okay? Option allows you to spin around, as I said before. And then Option and the Shift key held together with the left click on the mouse and drag allows you to slide side to side. Okay? So you're going to need both hands for this. This is a program that heavily relies on the keyboard. Okay, there's a lot of things that honestly you can't do without the keyboard. So you're going to start learning a lot of keystrokes and that sort of thing. And I have a list of all the keystrokes from a website that I found that I will be posting and giving to you guys so that you all have it. So that's basically how you move around in the 3D view. Option key spins, Option and Shift, slides side to side. Okay. Nice and simple. Oh, and scroll wheel zooms in and out. Now, right up here, we have this default thing. It says default. And then if I go down here, you'll see a whole bunch of options. If I choose different options, you're going to see that all of a sudden things will start to change pretty dramatically depending upon what you choose. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to actually stay in the default setting. But each one of those has a very specific purpose, and we're going to move amongst them, the windows, a lot. Animation versus compositing, default game logic. This is a game engine too. You can build games in here. I haven't really done a lot of that at all. I built a simple one years back when we were still before 2.5 even came out in version 2.4. And it was okay, and can do some cool stuff. Scripting allows you to add scripts and programming into your animations, which is really cool. UV editing and video editing, okay? UV editing we'll talk about later. But for now, we're just going to stay on default. And you'll notice with the default, right here we have a whole bunch of things called object tools. And you can see a lot of these things. Translate, rotate, scale. We'll talk about those today. And a whole bunch of other things that you can play with. And then we have this little space here called operator. We'll talk about that in a second as well. Then down here at the bottom, you see your timeline. You also have some, go away. You also have some playback controls here and stuff like that. That's can be kind of important. Notice you've got your timeline here in frames, just like in Flash. Also notice you can go backwards in time. This is kind of cool. Because what it means is you can actually set an animation to start at like -30 frames. Why would you want to do that? Somebody think. Just guess.
So that the person's already doing something before.
Bingo. So if you have an object that you want to have in motion before the shot starts, you can have it start its motion before the animation actually begins. It's kind of like, you see shots in the movies all the time of a car driving down the highway. Now, to set up the shot, they probably had the car stopped and they said, okay, action, and the car accelerated, right? But they don't show you that part. They wait until the car gets up to 60 miles an hour and then they cut into the shot, right? So that's a similar idea here. I mean, there's other ways of getting around that too, but anyway, you get the point. So you get your timing here. Now down here you have a whole bunch of controls for this window. We're going to go over some of these a little bit more in just a second. And then over here on the right, you got a couple things. Actually up at the top here, you have a list of objects. And you can right click on them and delete them and all sorts of other stuff. Turn them, make them invisible, unselectable, unrenderable. In other words, they won't even show up in the animation. All sorts of fun stuff there. And then right below it, we actually have a whole series of buttons that control a whole series of menus. And when you hover, it tells you what they are. So there's a rendering menu, a scene menu, a global world menu, which gives you like atmosphere, sky color, all sorts of fun stuff. And then here you have an object menu. We're going to go back to that in a second. You have constraints, modifiers, object data, really complicated stuff. Materials, okay, so you can kind of like give it a material. Textures, you can give it textures. Particles, ooh, those are fun. And then even better, physics, physical forces. Yes, you can do water, smoke, what they call soft body or cloth stuff. So like you could make clothes and then apply a cloth material to them so that if you got the clothes draped around a body and that person moves, his arm affects the cloth and it wrinkles and folds. I mean, it's really, really cool. And again, it's free. It's free program, and they give you all this stuff. It's awesome. By the way, these take your computer years to do. You got to have a really powerful computer, graphics, lots of graphics cards, high-end graphics cards to really move fast on these. But it's there. It's cool. So that's pretty much it. Now let's talk about moving an object around. Okay. Right up here you'll see it says translate, rotate, and scale. Those three things are actually going to correspond to these three buttons we have right here. See, translate manipulator, rotate manipulator, and scale manipulator. When I go to work on an object, you'll notice that it's got these three arrows here. And I can left click on an arrow and I can move it in one of the axes. See? So if I just use the left click button on the mouse, I can move it along one of the axes. Up, down, okay, in our y-axis or in the x-axis. If I right click on the object and hold that down and start to drag, I can also drag the object around. I personally don't like doing this, and the reason being, let's take a look. So I just pushed it back, right? No. If you look, I've floated it up. Okay, so a lot of times from a certain viewpoint with the camera, it can look like you pushed it back, or you may have tried to push it back, but it won't push back. So one of the reasons why I don't like doing that, using the right click and grab, is because you have to be very mindful of what you're doing. I like left clicking on the arrows, and I move it back a little bit, I move it over a little bit, and I just use those arrows and fine tune where I want things to go. The other thing that you can do is if I go over here to this menu and I click on my object bar, you can see I have a whole series of coordinates here. Okay, X, Y, and Z axes, and rotation and scale. So if I wanted to, I can move it over in the X just by clicking. Whoops, I'm rotating it. Whoops. See, I can just click, drag, and slide. Or I can click in there and highlight and type. Okay, and then it will actually move it to that point. So you can move things by the numbers, or you can move them with the cursor. Most of the time, I just grab the arrows and go. But it's important you understand you can do both. Okay, so the next tool is the rotate manipulator. Now this one's cool. I mean, it's really not that big of a deal, but it's still pretty cool. You'll notice that with the rotate manipulator, we get the object, and we have these three circles that well, four circles really, that are encompassing it. Notice they're color-coded again, just like our arrows. So if I grab the red circle, I start to rotate it, it rotates around the x-axis. If I grab the green one, it rotates around the y-axis. If I grab the blue one, it rotates around the z-axis. Now, the white circle rotates around the axis that's perpendicular to the camera. So in other words, the camera is pointing straight at the object. So it rotates around an axis that's basically imaginary, that's going from the camera to the object. If I rotate around the object, you'll notice that all three of the other circles move, but the white one does not. And in reality, it's the other three axes that don't move, but the white one that does. The white one is moving because it's based upon an imaginary line drawn from the object to the camera. Does that make sense to everybody? So you want to use this white one kind of carefully, because if you don't, you can really mess up your object and really twist it. But the truth of the matter is, let's say you really screw up a maneuver, you can just go back over here and zero it all back out again, hit 0, 0, 0, and now your object is right back to where it was started. You know, so very worst, it's not horrible. You can always kind of go back. And the last one of these three tools is our scale manipulator, which you see right here. Okay, and you'll see this looks familiar, doesn't it? Okay, we've got three axes. I can scale this way. Okay, I can make it thinner. I can scale this way, and I can scale this way. Okay. Notice it scales in both directions. It scales from the center out. Okay, so it's important to kind of keep in mind. The other thing is then if I grab the white circle and scale, then it scales in all 3 axes proportionally. So you'll see that now that I've scaled it and made it long, skinny, and tall, it stays long, skinny, and tall. It just scales it proportionally long, skinny, and tall. See? Kind of cool. Okay? Nice and simple. Now, one last thing that we should deal with today, and that is how to delete and add objects. Okay? To delete an object, well, actually, we'll deal about deleting in a second. So I want to add another object. Right up here we have the Add menu. That would make sense. And you click, and there's all the objects that you can possibly add. Force fields, cameras, lamps, speaker, audio, okay? Empties, we'll talk about those. Armatures, that should sound familiar. Bones, okay, which, well, I'm not going to worry about those. Text, metaballs, surface, NURBS objects, curves, and then mesh. And mesh is what we're going to be concerned with for the most part. I'm just going to add a sphere, so let's just add a sphere in. Now, here's what happens. This is important. Remember I showed you this little target symbol here? Whenever you left-click, it moves that target symbol. In order to click on an object, actually select an object, you have to right-click on an object in Blender. The left-click only moves this little target. What this target does is the target is where your new object is going to be added. This is really cool because or else they'd all come in the middle, right? And sometimes you might have objects within objects and you might not even know they were there. So you can tell Blender where you want it to put the new object. So when I go and I add a UV sphere, okay, I get a nice little circle that's right there, okay? Now let's say I wanted to delete an object. I right-click on it. So you see how I can right-click on them to select one. I hit the X key, delete. The other way that I can delete an object is to go over here to my list, and assuming I know which one is which you can do the same little Photoshop trick I taught you where you turn it on and off to check it, I can right-click and I can hit the delete right there, and it goes away, okay? Let's say I wanted to add another sphere. It would probably be smart if I moved the little plus symbol over here and added another sphere. There we go. And now I can start moving them around, playing with them in 3D space, okay? Right-click to select a new one. And that's going to be one of the hardest things for you guys to get used to, and it was for me too, the right-clicking. You use the right-click button a lot in this program to select things, okay? It gets kind of difficult. Well, no, that's probably a pretty good introduction. Okay, so delete is the X key to delete an object. To add an object, you can go up here to the Add menu. Oh, there is one last thing I'd like to show you. And that is sometimes, as you're starting to play with the tools down here and stuff, the dock on the Mac will pop up and really start to annoy you. So one of the things that you can do is right here is this full screen button. And what you do is you hit that, and it takes over the entire screen. And now you can go down here, and the dock never pops up on you. It's really nice. It's really nice. You don't have to worry about it. And then if you need to get to the top menu bar, that'll drop down if you stay up there for a few seconds so you can do whatever you want, okay? Don't need to save anything. We'll talk about saving later. I just want you to play. Although saving is simple, you just hit File and Save As. Okay, that's pretty obvious. Okay? Yes, question?
Was it like a black thing?
All the black things. So this one right here or this one right here?
Yeah.
Okay? Good question. Those black things you can click on and you can move them. They are objects. That is your lamp, so that's your first light that's in your scene automatically. And this one is your camera. In Flash, when we did animation, we didn't have a camera. But now you've actually got a camera. And you can animate that camera just like you can animate any other object. So it's almost like having a real movie set up where you have objects moving in front of you and then you have somebody walking with your camera or put it on a dolly or something like that. Here you can do the same thing. Yeah, it becomes very, very, very cool. It's very powerful. But good question. Those are your camera. That's your camera and your light. You can change the light if you want. You can delete it. They're objects just like anything else, so they are under the same controls that any of the other objects are on inside the software. You can add physics to them, anything pretty much. Any other questions? That was a very good one. No? To get out of this, you just go back to the little button, click there. Now you can see all your stuff, and that's about all I can think of. Okay?